you've played villain, you've played hero, but like, I mean, when you became the Iraqi Sympathizer, there's so much real life stuff going on. You know, the Gulf War's about to start. Did you have it? What were your thoughts when you initially were pitched that character about, you know, whether to do it, your safety, all that kind of stuff?
Well, he invited me to his house, and I went to his house, and he came out and met me at my car and gave me a big hug, and it was like we'd never missed a beat, and that there was no problem. So we went into his house, and he said, "Appreciate your letter, and but I've got an idea." And I said, "Okay." And he took me into his kind of a library, and he had this prototype of WrestleMania 7 at the LA Coliseum. Had all kinds of big screens and everything because it was a big outdoor show. Could hold 104,000 people. He said, "This is WrestleMania 7, and I would like you and Hulk Hogan to sell it out for me." And I said, "You want Hulk Hogan and I to sell that out for you?" He said, "Yeah, I want to beat the WrestleMania 3 record of 93,000. I want you and Hogan to sell it out 104,000. I said, "I'm in for that. I'm in for that." So how are you going to turn Hulk Hogan into the villain? And he said, "Hulk Hogan? No, I want you to be the villain." I said, "Me? I'm G.I. Joe, the real American hero." And I said, I came over here thinking you're going to make me the real American hero against Hulk Hogan. I didn't know at the time that was going to be Hulk, but I knew it was something big. And he said, no, I want you to be the villain. I said, "Well, how are you going to do that?" And he started explaining to me how he wanted me to be an Iraqi sympathizer, that I came back after being with G.I. Joe, and I was really disappointed in my country. I was disappointed in the military. They're weak. They let a little country like Iraq take over Kuwait and get all the uranium. And he went through this whole scenario, how he wanted me to become this Iraqi sympathizer. And it kind of gave me chills, you know. So he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, I kind of like it." He said, "Well, you know, it could get a little rough. So why don't you go home and talk to your family about it first? And then once you get an answer from them, then call me and we'll decide if we're going to go that way." I said, "Okay." So I go home, same kind of setup, having dinner with my family. And my wife says, "Well, how did the meeting go with Vince?" I said, "It went great. It went great. He wants me to come back and wrestle Hulk Hogan, you know, in WrestleMania 7 at the LA Coliseum. 104,000 fans. And she said, "Wow, that's great. How are you going to make Hulk Hogan the villain?" And I said, "Well, we're not going to do that." She said, "What? What are you going to do?" So I started telling her Vince's idea. And she looked at me and shook her head. She said, "Bob, if you do that, you're going to get killed. You are putting your life in danger because that's a real thing happening. That's not something made up. That's a real war that's going on. It wasn't a war yet, but it was getting close." So she said, "But you do whatever you think you need to do because you've always made the decision on your character from the time you were a beautiful Bobby." She said, "You go do what you ever have to do, but don't tell me I didn't warn you. Don't, you know." I said, "Well, I know it's going to get a little rough." She said, "Rough? You don't even know. You don't even know." And I'm kind of like, "Well, okay." So I called Vince. "Okay, here we go." And that's basically what happened. And of course, she was right.
So when you're becoming the Iraqi sympathizer, but then you're put with General Adnan, which seemed to just make it so much more intense. Talk about getting him to be involved.
Well, I knew Adnan El-Casey from Minneapolis. He was a manager there. He wrestled, and he was actually from Iraq. He went to college with Saddam Hussein and hated him because of what he was doing. And so he was in Minneapolis. So I called him. I said, "Do you have any thoughts of coming to New York and being my my manager, but I'm going to call you General Adnan. But I said, I'd like you to try to dress up kind of like Saddam and kind of look like a soldier, like Saddam Hussein, like a general. And he said, yeah, I could do that. So we were in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and Adnan came in, and Vince was in his office, and we'd already started the Iraqi Sympathizer, but I didn't have the general yet. So I said, Vince, I got an idea. I brought a friend in, and I want you to see what you think. And so here come Adnan, and I introduced him, and he said, I know Billy. Yeah, Billy White Wolf. He used to wrestle as Billy White Wolf in the WWF with Strongbow, Jay Strongbow, Chief Jay Strongbow, and he were partners. They were like Indians. And so he said, yeah, I know Billy. What do you got in mind? I said, well, I want to make him my general. I said, number one, he kind of looks like Saddam. But number two is he can speak the language. He speaks the language of I don't know what they call it, Farsi or whatever it is. Anyway, he said, well, let's give it a try. I said, Adnan, did you bring your uniform and all that? He said, yeah. He said, well, go put it on. So we're waiting, and pretty soon he comes through the door, and I had to look twice. I thought it was Saddam Hussein walking through the door. He had a uniform on, the beret. He had got his mustache thick and black and looked just like Saddam Hussein walking in. And he had a gun. It was a plastic gun, but a gun on holster. And he walks in. And Vince McMahon just went, oh, my God. I thought that was Saddam Hussein. I said, well, that's my idea. Make him my general so that put a little more heat on the fire, And he said, I love it. I said, but there's only one thing I want you to do, Adnan. He said, what? I said, get rid of that gun. Don't give anybody any ideas that that's a real gun. Get rid of that plastic thing. Just other than that, I'm in with it. So he, of course, could get the Iraqi flags, and he got all kinds of things from his brother was actually a general in the army of Saddam. So anything he wanted, his brother would send him. So there we went, and we started in Hershey, Pennsylvania. I brought him out, introduced him as my general, and that really put some gasoline on the fire. And from that point on, it was we had to have bodyguards and armed guards and all kinds of things. It really took off.
Well, I was going to ask you because obviously there's that famous image leading up to WrestleMania 7. You're the champion and you burn Hulk Hogan's shirt.
Right.
But originally they wanted you to burn something else.
Yeah. Yeah, they came to me and they said, this is Jesse Ventura's idea. And I said, oh, what is it? He said, if you really want to get some heat, how about burning the American flag? And I said, that's not heat, that's murder. And that is a slap in the face to anybody that ever laced up a pair of combat boots or anybody that had someone that was in the military. I said, there's no way I'm going to burn the American flag. My father, my uncles, they served in the military. And I said, but I tell you what, why don't we take Hulk Hogan's T-shirt, put it on a flagpole, and I'll say that's Americana. That's a sign of Americana, and I'll light that on fire. I said, that's going to be much better because if you start burning the American flag, people are going to start shooting. They aren't going to be messing around. That's you're going way over the line. And Jesse Ventura, who was a Navy SEAL, because he believes in the First Amendment that you can, do what you want to do, but burning the American flag wasn't one of my things on my list to do. So, but unfortunately, a few times when I wasn't around, Gene Okerlund would have like a IB, I think they call it, in his ear, and he'd be doing a promo, and he'd go, "Ladies and gentlemen, I just heard Sgt Slaughter is out behind the building burning the American flag." And I'm watching television or watching it. What did he just say? And it was already, on the show. There's nothing I could do about it. So I had to live with that because everybody actually thought I was out behind the building burning the American flag. So from that point on, I couldn't go anywhere. I went to a restaurant one time with my agent, and it was like 3:00 in the morning, and there was nobody in there. So I came, waitress came over, and I said, sweetheart, do you mind if we get something to eat? Can we order something? And she looked at me, and she ran back in the kitchen. And about 5 minutes later, here come this big burly guy, had a Navy cap on. He was a cook. And he come out and he had a spatula in his hand. And he comes over the table. He says, "Is there a problem?" I said, no problem. We just wanted to order something to eat. And he looked at my manager and he goes, "He can eat." And then he put the spatula on my nose. It was like hitting my nose with it. And he said, "But you're not. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, you can go sit in the car while he's eating." And I said, "That's okay." I said to my manager, "I think we should probably go eat somewhere else." So, from that point on, it was, I had to have armed guards around my house. I came when I won the title from the Ultimate Warrior in Miami in 1991. The next day, we went to Philadelphia and to do a television. And when I got there, Jay Strombo was one of the agents. And he said, "Hey, Sarge, hell of a show last night. Hell of a show. Congratulations. You're the new champion." I said, thanks. And he said, "Have you talked to Vince today?" And I said, "No, I haven't talked to him." He said, "Have you talked to your wife today?" I said, "No, I haven't talked to my wife." "Well, maybe you want to give him a call." I said, "Was there something wrong? Something happened?" "No, just you call him." So I called my wife first. No answer. Got her machine. And so then I called Vince and he answered. He said, "Oh, hey, Sarge, hell of a show last night. Congratulations." And yeah. What's going on? "Well, have you talked to your wife?" I said, "No, I haven't got a hold of her yet." "Well, I happened to get a hold of her." And I said, "Oh, you did?" He said, "Yeah. Somebody called the wrestling office early this morning and said they're going to blow up the office. They're going to blow up the studio. They're going to blow up your house. They're going to blow up my house. They're going to kill you, all your family members, and kill me and all my family members. So I thought it'd be a pretty good idea if I got a hold of your wife to get her out of your house for a few days." I said, "Oh, thank you very much." And so he said, "But I got people coming over. They're going to be watching your house." I said, "Okay." So about 2 days later, I get home. I finally get a hold of my wife. I said, what happened?" She said, "Well, Vince called me and this and that." And I said, "Okay, well, I'll be home." So I get home, and I had this driveway that was pretty difficult to get up just by car. And when I got to the top of my driveway, there was a Winnebago there. How it got up there, I have no idea. So I stopped, got out of my car, and 4 gentlemen come walking over. All had coats on. They all lifted up their coats, opened up their coats, and showed me they were packing weapons. And they introduced themselves, and they said, we have been ordered to walk the perimeter of your property 24/7 and told until we're told not to. We're going to take your wife to the grocery store. We're going to go with her to the beauty shop. We're going to go to the school with your children, and we're going to go to with you, and all this. They laid the whole thing out. I said, "Well, I don't know about the first 2 parts, but if you want to go with me, that's fine." So I walk into the house, and there's my wife. She's got a rolling pin. I'll never forget it. And she's like patting her hand with it. And she said, "I told you that wasn't a good idea." "Didn't I tell you that wasn't a good idea?" I said, "Yeah, but it wasn't that. They said I burnt the American flag, and it's on fire." It's nuclear heat is what we call it. She said, well, you deal with it. But I tell you one thing, I'm not having any armed guards going to the beauty shop with me and to the grocery store, and your children aren't going to have an armed guard at their school either. I said, that's fine. That's fine. They don't have to, but they're going to go with me. So from that point on, I never went through an airport. I went through a fenced area, drove up underneath the airplane, and before they would put the tarmac out for people to go from the terminal onto the plane, I would just like the pilots, they'd put a ladder down and I would go up into the airplane. I'd sit in my seat. And then they would let the people on. The people would come on and they'd see me sitting there and they go, how the hell did he get on here? So then when we landed wherever we were going, I waited for everybody to get off the airplane. And as soon as they got off, the tarmac went back, the steps went down, and there was usually 2 cars and 2 squad cars that would take me either to the hotel or to the arena. And if I go to the hotel, I would stay in the hotel until the matches got to almost intermission. And then they would call me and say, we're coming to pick you up. Your match is next. So I would wrestle. They'd have intermission. While the intermission was going on, I either went back to my hotel room or I went off to the next show on an airplane. So people never saw me coming or going. I had 4 cars demolished, rental cars that I would get. So they decided to just, safety sake to do those things. I got stabbed 4 times. I got shot at several times, and it was a pretty hot item. But the hottest was my wife.